The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.
Welcome to the Tim Heale Podcast and Ordinary People's Extraordinary Stories. Today I've got a lovely guest, so without too much ado, let's bring her in. So, Nicole, you're in.
I'm in. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. So, Nicole, if you can tell me where you were born, not necessarily when you were born because you're a lady, if you can describe to me what it was like, where you grew up, the schools you went to, and the education that you received.
Sure.
That's all yours.
I am fine sharing when I was born. So I am 51 now. So it was in the early 70s that I was born. And I was born in Renton, Washington. I was born to a mom and a dad, and I have a sister. And my parents were divorced when I was about 2 years old. Lived with my mom and then later a stepdad that came on board probably when I was 3 or 4. And working class, a family. My stepdad was a operating engineer, which is the people who do the giant cranes, and he worked on many roads in the Puget Sound area, the freeways, and many construction projects over many years. And my mom was a dietetic assistant at a nursing home when I was little, and later she worked at a pizza parlor doing the prep work for that. So that was kind of my childhood. And then I went to school in the Tahoma School District until about high school, and then I went to Auburn. I drove there because they had more classes that I liked and that I wanted to take. But mostly it was because of a boy that I commuted to the Auburn High School as opposed to my local high school, if I'm honest with myself back then. And then somewhere along the way there in middle school, I got the idea that I was really bad at math. I had some rough math experiences that I decided taught me that I was not very smart or not very capable for a college track because I had a little trouble with algebra. So it took me a really long time to figure out my path and my schooling. I did do some community college type classes and did really well. None of them were math, but I got A's in all those other classes. And then I went off and got married and had children and did executive assistant work and that kind of thing. But I just really couldn't figure out my path and what I wanted to do. And
Well, let's
yeah,
let's
too much
let's
information, probably.
let's just wind you back.
Yeah, okay.
You've fallen into that little trap.
Of going on.
So
Yeah.
so this would be a very, very short podcast if we let it run on. So let's bring you all the way back then.
Okay.
Let's have a look at the area that you grew up in. What was your street like? Was it like a typical street where sort of wide street with houses, big houses either side, tree lined, kids playing out in the street because nobody had cars, or was it a busy high street?
It was neither of those. It was in Maple Valley, and Maple Valley back then was not as developed as it is now. And so it was very rural. So I had to walk quite a ways to be able to see friends. So it was kind of isolating actually, um, especially during the summer. So there weren't a lot of kids. There's one kid 5 miles down the road, and there was another kid that was kind of across the street, but their family was always on vacation, kind of thing. And so, yeah, it wasn't one of those experiences. But I did stay a lot with my cousins, and there was a lot of kids there. So I did get a lot of interaction that way.
All right. So your first school. Can you remember much about your kindergarten?
Yeah. Well, I loved kindergarten. I don't know. I mean, it was Mrs. Cook. She was beautiful and smart and kind. And she had long black hair. And back then, it was scandalous because she wore jeans to school as opposed to dressed like the other teachers.
Kind of frowned upon by the other teachers, was she?
Yeah, I think so. Or at least my mom made a comment and it stuck with me. So that's why I say that. It probably wasn't a big deal. It was probably just my mom. Yeah.
Fair enough. So, what was your favourite lessons in kindergarten?
Oh my gosh. Um, what were my favorite lessons in kindergarten? I don't know. I remember story time, the sitting there with the circle and everyone having story, and I remember liking show and tell. I read pretty early, so I walked in already pretty much being able to read. So I was there for the social.
Oh, right. So you enjoyed interacting with other kids because I suppose if you're sort of remote from other kids and you got, I mean, not close around you, did you have to go
Mhm.
on a bus?
Yes. Yes. That was a big part of my schooling was just constantly being on that bus because for some reason I was always on the bus route where I was closest to the school, but they always made you do the entire bus route and then on the way back they would drop you off. So I feel like most of my childhood was spent on a yellow bus.
Terrific. So, so moving on from kindergarten, then, uh, what was your next school? Was that like middle school,
Um, yeah, so I did elementary school, and then we had
elementary?
middle school. Yeah.
So you're elementary school then. So you're coming out of kindergarten. Um, you don't get as much playtime. You have to sit and do work. So how did you
Mhm.
find that?
So what?
So going from kindergarten to elementary school, how was the transition for you?
Oh, that was great. I had a lot of really good teachers. I don't have too many memories or concerns about elementary school.
Was it the same school that the kindergarten was in, or was it a different school? Did you have to take a
It was
different
the same
bus?
school. Yeah, it was the same school. Still on that bus all the time, back and forth. But other than that, it was the same school mostly. Yeah.
So did you have any lessons that you didn't like? That you woke up in the morning and you think, I don't want to go to school today.
Yeah, that didn't happen until algebra in middle school. I liked all my classes. Um, you know, later on, I found some classes I didn't like, but yeah, middle school, I loved everything and I loved learning, and I was often in the library at lunchtime looking at other books and different things. So yeah, I elementary school was just a lot of fun.
They didn't force you out into the playground then.
Well, there was definitely playground activities. I remember liking the gymnastic bars, and I remember people playing different, balls and kind of dodgeball, I guess. But mostly, yeah, I would. I had my group of friends that I played with. We liked to play on those bars and twirl around, doing kind of
Mm.
gymnastic stuff on there, and then of course tag, all the things, but I would sometimes go in the library and just read and look at books.
So what was your favourite topic that you liked to read about?
I remember being very excited when I learned about the planets. I remember bringing home lots of books about that and doing the whole Saturn styrofoam ball project where I'm trying to show the moons and Saturn. And so that was a big project. I remember being very fascinated by that in elementary school.
Mm. So were you sporty?
I was not sporty. I was sick a lot when I was little. And so And also my parents worked full time, and so they weren't available to take me to all the different sporting events. It wasn't like it is now. Now it's like a full time job for your parents to take you to sporting events. But even then, my parents were working a lot, and so I
Mm.
didn't kind of get put into that environment at an early age at all. And so as I progressed through my schooling, I was more in the drama crowd and the stagecraft crowd and the choir and that sort of thing.
All right. So you're a bit of a thespian back then?
I was, yeah.
So did you take part in any plays?
I did. So, Midsummer Night's Dream, I think was my first one. I got to play Puck. And then that was one at a local community college, actually. And then in high school, um, All's Well That Ends Well, we did quite a few. So my drama teacher in high school, I was very lucky because I worked with someone who was very much a thespian and actually trained in England and came back with that knowledge. So my education was really great because we would take a Shakespeare play, and our job was to go through it with the Oxford English Dictionary and figure out what the context was of the words we were about to say, which it was hardcore. It was great. But I really liked it, and
I
I
can
learned.
tell you a little bit about a Shakespeare play.
Yeah,
I managed to get tickets to go to the Old Vic in London to see As You Like It. Now, they did it in Old English. They might as well have done it in Swahili. I couldn't understand what they were on about. Really couldn't.
yeah,
It was way over my head.
yeah. It's contextually, it's completely different. So that was
Mm.
good. He wanted us to understand the words that were coming out of our mouth so that we could have the correct intonation and iambic pentameter. What was it? Iambic pentameter, something like that. So he was very technical, and that was a long time ago. And I'm not a
Mm.
thespian anymore, so I can't remember that. But it was a great education in theater that I got in high school from him. Dr.
So
Fu, Mr. Fooey was his name, actually.
I'm more Noel Coward, me. Noel Coward and a farce rather than Shakespeare.
Yeah, that works.
So, were you musical at all? Did you have a musical instrument you played?
I did not. There was a short period in fifth grade band where there was a baritone horn that I thought I was going to play. And it was very big and difficult to get to my rural bus stop. And that didn't last very long, but I was in choir. So I really enjoyed singing in choir.
Hmm. So, what are you? Are you a baritone or a soprano?
I don't know what I am now, but I think I was a soprano. I think I did alto and soprano type of singing. And I'm so out of practice now. I'm not sure what the sound would be. Yeah. It's just me singing in the shower and nobody cares, so it's all good.
Happy days. So let's have a look at your junior high. How did you get on with junior high school?
Yeah, junior high was really hard for me. Junior high, I could not figure out the social dynamics of the other girls. There was a lot of bullying going on. Junior high, I remember being on the bus and telling myself on one of my many very long bus rides. Um, I remember telling myself, you know what, you just got to get through junior high, Nicole, and it's all going to get better from there. And I
Hmm.
was right. So junior high was rough for me.
Was it a different school to the middle school, or was it all the schools in one school and just a big school? Or
It was
did
a different school. Yeah, it was a different school. It's beautiful brick school that was kind of within walking distance of my house, actually. Um, and it was seventh, eighth, no, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade that went there.
hmm. So you managed to walk to school without taking a bus?
Home. I went home. I walked home often from there. It was just up this big hill. So yes, there was more walking. But if you stayed for any activities, sometimes you'd have to take the bus type of thing. So it was less busing though. You're right.
Hmm. That's a
But then high
result in
school,
itself then.
yeah.
So, was there any particular lessons that you didn't want to go to, other than your algebra, obviously?
Uh, let's see. I started realizing that I'm not a huge history buff, at least not my own country's history. So my interest in history was I liked the classics and the classical history and the kind of ancient history and the Romans and all of that. So, but that wasn't taught in my school. So I had lots of books at home with those interesting topics, but I found that Washington state history and some of those other things I just found very boring. so but that was actually more high school where I started to kind of rebel against having to learn things I didn't want to learn, which I figured out was a lifelong theme for me. Um, so no, it was mostly just I started noticing I was having a little trouble with math, but again, it was just the math. I loved writing. I loved reading. I did great in English. I did really well in most of my classes in junior high.
Hmm. So, what about your high school then? Moving up, did things
Yeah,
start to change?
yeah. So in high school, um, again, in high school was a little bit rough for me also. Um, so by then I had decided I wasn't good at math. And I kind of got some really wrong ideas about my capabilities, which I think happens to a lot of girls in school. Um, we get messages and ideas, and we take them into our sense of self, and it kind of derails us a little bit from what we're capable of. So that was me. Got boy crazy, got a boyfriend, focused way too much on that. Didn't know how to take good care of myself. Um, Worked a lot, all kinds of stuff. So that was my high school. I graduated my high school with a D average, which is hilarious because when I went back to college and graduate school, it was all A's, you know. But in high school, I had somehow just decided that I was going to do the bare minimum. This was dumb. And I wasn't going to go to college anyways. And so, whatever. That was my philosophy back then.
So, finally graduated high school with a D.
Mhm.
With a D.
1.6 GPA. Yeah.
So, so with a fantastic score like that, were you allowed to go to prom?
Oh, yeah.
Did you have to stay on for summer school?
Nope. Nope. Again, I did just the bare minimum. I never failed any classes that I can remember. I just would do the bare minimum, and I decided that I didn't care about the grades. Now, again, in all fairness, I didn't take very good care of myself. I stayed up late. I had trouble getting up in the morning. I'm sure I didn't eat very well. Remember when you were born in the early 70s, highly processed foods were a staple in the diet. I'm sure I was micronutrient deficient. So I wasn't in an optimal place to do my very best for sure.
You sound like a normal teenager.
Yeah. Normal for then, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, most teenagers have difficulty first thing in the morning. Happy to
Mhm.
stay up all night and watch whatever, but when it comes to getting up in the morning.
Yeah. Makes it hard.
So after graduation then of high school, what did you do next?
Well, let's see. I lived away from home, and I mostly just worked full time. Um, and that was fine. I but I think that that was a time period where I was learning that I was actually much more capable of what I was doing. So I would go to
Hmm.
jobs. there'd be a learning curve. I'd be like, oh, this is fun. And I would learn it and I would master it and I would immediately get super bored and be like, okay, well, now what? And you can only do that so many times, before you're like, oh, this,
Yeah.
I just don't want to have
So
a boring job over and over and over again. Yeah.
yeah, it's not good for the resume to have
Right.
too many jobs too quickly.
Yeah.
Um, say somebody you go for a job and say, "Well, you've had a lot of jobs. I don't think you'll fit in here."
Yeah.
So you what sort of jobs were you doing?
Oh my gosh. Let's see. I was a bank teller, but this is kind of funny. Uh, Again, I don't have a great brain for numbers and math. So I was a teller, but I would never actually zero out properly at the end of the night. And the teller person would have to come help me figure out I was always like giving away an extra quarter or something. Um, it was awful. That part was awful. But I did really well with the customer service part. So I think they tolerated me. But I was a terrible teller, could never balance at the end of the night. Let's see, what else did I do? Let's see. Oh yeah, I waitressed at a pancake house, and I had to wear this terrible uniform, very polyester brown Swiss Alps wannabe uniform. Can't believe I did that in high school. You'd think I'd be too vain at that age, right? But no, the tips were good, so I wore the outfit. What else did I do? Administrative assistant, a little bit of website building back then, which is nothing like what it is now. It was like a little bit of HTML. And then I did executive assistant. That was probably one of the more funner ones that I had. And somewhere in there, I had two children and decided that I was going to go back to school. And so my executive assistant job was the last job I had before I decided I just need to go back to college.
Okay, so what age were you when you went to college then?
So I did some community college while still in high school in a summer program, but mostly it was after my second daughter was born. I decided, I was very good at like organizing and planning and that sort of thing. And I thought, well, I'm going to go back to school and I'm going to become a project manager for technology projects. And I enrolled in that program, and it got to the point where they wanted me to actually learn more advanced coding as part of that training. And I was like, this does not look fun for me. I do not want to learn how to code. I found that very aversive. And I looked around and I saw in my office and I saw all these books about psychology and relationships and brains. And I thought, this is what I read for fun. I wonder if I should go back and learn this stuff. And sure enough, the next thing I know, I'm in a psychology program, clinical psychology program, and I enjoyed that much more than I ever would have trying to learn to code. I'm sure. Yeah.
So what aspect of psychology sort of drew you in? What was your main focus?
Yeah, I think that and maybe someone would disagree with this, but I think this has been my experience also in working with other people in psychology and such. Uh, I think interest in relationships and building healthy relationships. So if you come from a childhood or an experience in junior high like me, right, where there was not healthy relationships and you can't figure out what was going wrong and why it was like that, I think that psychology really holds a lot of interest to you because you're trying to make sense of your
Hmm.
narrative. You're trying to make sense of what went wrong back then. And so I had two children, and I was very interested in being a good mom, and I was very interested in attachment, and I was very interested in how to do very, how to help them the best way I can and be there for them. And so I think that's what drew me into psychology originally.
Hmm. So how long was the course?
Oh, well, it was a bachelor's. Did the bachelor's. I believe that was 4 years. And then I moved into a PsyD, which is a form of a doctorate in clinical psychology. And then there's a whole story there about why I left with my master's a little bit early. I was very close to finishing my doctorate, but I chose to leave early for a lot of different reasons.
Hmm. So do you want to go into that? Why? I mean, you could have got a doctorate and been on megabucks.
Megabucks. I don't know. I don't know. Megabucks. I Over here we have the insurance industry, and it kind of is like a mafia, and it controls how much we can actually make over here. But um, maybe I would have got megabucks if. And I was on a neuropsychology track, so I was very interested in the all the testing and the assessment and that kind of thing. And so maybe I would have made megabucks. Maybe I should have stayed, but it was a little bit too much for me at that point. So in my very first semester of graduate school, I developed a chronic pain syndrome called trigeminal neuralgia, which is a really painful thing that happens with your face. It's nerve pain, and then I was getting daily migraines. And so that was pretty awful. And I tried all the things over here. When you have chronic pain, they're very quick to try to get you on pain medication. And after much effort and a lot of pain, they finally talked me into that.
Mhm.
And I remember in the office, them telling me, this is your only option. This is all we can do for you. And crying and being very afraid that I would never, that I wouldn't be able to get off of it when I wanted to, or if I could. And sure enough, I was one of those people who habituated very quickly to the medication. And then after doing my own research, I looked up and found a surgical procedure using a neurostimulator, which put, wires up and helped reprogram that part of my face and neck that was chronically agitated and in pain. And that was fantastic. That worked.
Mm.
Um, I had
We,
to find it, and not my
yeah,
doctor. It was never offered to me. I had to research that and find that.
and after you had that done, did you get off the pain relief?
Well, they tried. They tried. So the doctors kept trying to put me on a bridge medication that was supposed to work and help me get off of the all that pain medication. But I was one of those tough cookies, and the bridge medication just kept not working, and it kept causing liver problems, and it was terrible. And so I was stuck on it for longer. And then they finally, after many, many painful and difficult attempts, finally got me onto a bridge medication. But what a lot of people don't know is that that bridge medication can be actually much more difficult to get off of than the original pain medication. And so many people are stuck on bridge medications their whole life. But that
Mm.
was not disclosed to me as part of informed consent. So I was stuck on a lot of medications, either full blown opioids or bridge medications for over 14 years. And so going through graduate school I wasn't on a bridge medication in graduate school. I was actually on really high opioid doses. And anyone who knows that it's hard to regulate emotion on that. I was tired. My husband had been unemployed for a really long time. I needed to just get back in there and get in, make money as a
Mm.
psychotherapist. Um, and it was just stressful, and I just didn't have it in me to do that anymore. And also, I didn't have it. I mean, I had a dissertation in me, I'm sure. Probably still do. There's one blue one floating around in there trying to happen. But it was just, anyone who has chronic pain knows that it's very wearing with or without medication. And so I just didn't have it in me. But also, my school that I began in my bachelor's program was a nonprofit school. And by the end, it had been completely changed and was completely different. All my mentors were gone because they had turned into a corporation. And
Mm.
so I was just very kind of disillusioned and ready to just get into the workforce and do my thing at that point.
And did you?
Yeah, I did. I came out and I started my private practice, and I've been a clinical psychotherapist for 16 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did you find it at the beginning? How,
How did I what?
how did you find it in the beginning to set up on your own?
I I liked it. I've always been a little bit of I'm fairly confident, and so I was just, I just started my own practice, and I started working with people, and opened an office near my home, and that sort of thing. And I learned all kinds of evidence-based treatments like cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, EMDR, behavioral therapy. Those are kind of my wheelhouses that I do really well in. And I really liked it. But the thing is that I found that, so I was doing great for a while. And while I'm in my private practice, I have all this going, different medications and doctors and surgeries, and transitioning to the bridge medication, and all that is going on over these many years of my private practice. Finally, I think this is important. This is an important part of my story. Finally, I got off of the bridge medication with an experimental protocol that was really quite brutal, and I actually developed really pretty severe cognitive impairment. So many years on pain medication causes neurodegeneration. So it causes a lot of problems with memory, cognition, frontal lobe function. So I've had this long history of that. And then when I was done with my detoxification, I was very ill, and my cognitive impairment was severe enough where it was right up there with stage 1 Alzheimer's. So I went from being able to, in my first, year of grad school, being able to read a passage, remember later what book it was in, what page, and see it on the page, to stage 1 Alzheimer's type symptoms. So my cognition was awful. I was all my husband and I could do was just laugh about how impaired I was, because really when it gets to that, I thought I was going to have to close my practice, because I would spend some of my session panicked trying to remember the name of the person that I had already met with 20 times. I'm listening to their story, and there's a little part of my brain that's like, what is their name? What is their name? What is their name? Like, it was really bad. And then something happened that completely changed everything for me and how I practice. Um, and that's a big part of why I'm here today, speaking coherent sentences to you and able to keep my train of thought and being able to share my story at all.
So what was it?
So,
What was the catalyst that brought it on?
yeah. So the catalyst was, so I was listening to podcasts. Again, I was listening because I had stopped being able to read. Basically, I couldn't hold information. So I was listening to podcasts, and there was a researcher on there named Dom D'Agostino, and he was on a podcast called STEM Talk. And he was talking about Alzheimer's disease and cognitive impairment. He was talking about ketogenic diets and how that was being used for cognitive impairment. And I listened to that, and that piqued my interest, because I would have really liked a working brain back then. And so I did more research into it to the best of my ability. And after a few months of stops and starts and getting it wrong and trying again, I got it right, and I felt my brain turn back on. And I knew I was on the beginning of my healing for that. And so my brain just kept getting better and better. But the thing about it that really struck me was the effects that it had on my mood. So here I was, I was in graduate school, which is stressful. I had my own practice, which was stressful. There's other things going on, which was stressful. And I had a lot of skills as a therapist, and I managed stress and anxiety quite well. But after the ketogenic diet, there was this profound effect on my mood. And I realized that I was just walking around through life really anxious and not even really realizing. I didn't realize the level of effort it took to keep anxiety down and to keep stress down. And there was such a profound shift in how my brain worked on a ketogenic diet. Suddenly, nothing was overwhelming. Suddenly, there was nothing I needed to avoid because everything was manageable. I really can't put into words what that shift was like. And I thought, oh my goodness, my clients need this. My patients, where I'm their fifth therapist and they're on their 10th medication, they need to know about this. This is really important. And so I spent some time being afraid to talk about it because, we have a license in one thing and we can't practice out of that license, or we're going to get in trouble. And so I was fearful. But after a while, I decided that it was a completely unethical stance for me not to share this potential treatment with patients who were struggling. So I went back and I got extra training in how to do ketogenic diets for mental illness and neurological disorders. Got confident, found other doctors, nurse practitioners, professionals, psychiatrists who also used it as a primary method in their practice. And I brought it to my practice. And so for the last 6 years, that has been something that I have specialized in, that I'm really passionate about, and it has become a really big part of my story where I am in my life right now.
Mm. So your clients, your patients, how do you find them in the first place that have got the need for your skill set? Are
Mm-hmm.
they referred on from other doctors? How do you go about finding your patients?
Yeah. Well, I wish they would be referred on from more doctors. So there's a lot of research going on about ketogenic diets. It's not mainstream or standard of care yet. And with, pharma and pills being easier, it might not be. I think it will be eventually though, because the differences in people's well-being are so improved that I think it's a train that's not going to be stopped by pharmaceutical companies, because people are recovering and going into remission. People with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder many of them are finding remission or exponential improvement on ketogenic diet. So I think it's just a matter of time before regular doctors start sending people my way. But I do get a lot of people who seek out and find me because they've heard about ketogenic diets as a treatment. But I also just get, run of the mill everyday people who know nothing about ketogenic diets who look for a mental health counselor, and it ends up coming up in the conversation because, as I said, many of them are on many medications with side effects they don't like. They want to know about all the different ways they can feel better. This might be one of them. So I integrate some nutritional stuff into my work as a psychotherapist, because your
Mm.
brain needs basic building blocks to work. And if you're not giving it that, and it's not working, it's not particularly helpful to give you a diagnosis now, is it? We don't know how your brain works. We haven't given it the
Mm.
basic things it needs to see how it does function. So let's start there.
Mm. So let's just go back a couple of 3 years. How did lockdown treat you? What did you do for in lockdown? I mean, come the 20th of March 2020, the pin came out and you couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
Were you able to carry on practicing? Did you realign your business to do it online? Or were you already doing it online? How did that affect you?
So when lockdown happened, I had an office that I paid for every month, that I was in a lease for, and all that good stuff. Beautiful little building in downtown Vancouver, historical building called the Heritage Building, and I loved my little office. But and then when lockdown happened, I didn't know how to do Zoom. I didn't know how to do any of those things. It took me about a month and a half. I just kept waiting. I just kept thinking, oh, it's gonna open back up. And then once I realized it wasn't going to open back up right away, I had other friends who had adapted much more quickly that taught me how to use these methods. So that was actually very good for me, because I learned that I can do excellent work through telehealth of what I think is the same level, and many of my patients really like and think is of the same level, and not have to pay the overhead of an office and the expense of an office. So I liked that part about COVID. And that's probably the only part I liked, was that I learned I didn't need a lease. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the same for me. I mean, I don't think I'd have been doing this had we not been locked down.
Hmm.
It was due to lockdown, the fact that I was drinking far too much spiced rum because I had nothing to do. That
Hmm.
and I was doing a bit on Ancestry. That's where I found my great granddad, and thinking that his story's lost. Well, if I don't
Yeah.
tell mine, that's lost. So that's how I got into the podcast malarkey to start with, and it's kind
Yeah.
of developed on from there. And now I think you're number 177 interviews that I've done.
My goodness. That's a lot.
I think I'm getting a little bit better at it.
I'm sure you are. Yeah. Yeah.
So, what's the future hold then?
Yeah. What does the future hold? So, um, gosh, the future holds. I've been really enjoying going to different trainings and conventions around ketogenic metabolic therapies. Um, I've been having a great time connecting. I've always been a little bit of a cat, meaning I just am always doing kind of my own thing. And even when I had an office, it's you just went to your office and maybe you saw the same people in the hall and said hi. It wasn't like we were all hanging out around a water
Mm.
cooler. But I think I really appreciate all of the people that I work with in the metabolic psychiatry space, and I get to share all the fun things I'm doing with them and them with me. So travel, it holds, I'm developing some trainings for psychologists and therapists about metabolic therapies for mental illness. So I'm excited about that. What does it hold? I don't know. It's very exciting. I think it's very exciting. I'm excited to see this be communicated as a treatment for people, and people getting to know that it's an option. It means a lot more blog writing, articles for me, because there's research coming out constantly. It means travel with my husband and seeing my girls. And yeah, I don't know. How do people usually answer that? What do they say when you ask them about the
Well,
future?
hopefully the future's bright. Hopefully you've. I mean, the plan going forward is, I guess, you're going to carry on doing the online stuff,
Mm-hmm.
because it's working quite well.
Yeah, it is. And I have an online program too, which is fun. So I think I see that expanding. I work with people all over the world doing this. And they do it as part of an online program. And so hopefully that is going to increase accessibility for people who want access to it.
Mm. So access to it. How do people get access to it? How can they get hold of you?
Oh, yeah. So the easiest way is just to email me, Nicole at mentalhealthketo.com. That's also my blog. There's a lot of great science articles on there about ketogenic diets and how it affects brain chemistry and metabolism. Um, that is probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. I'm very active on Twitter for the most part, and LinkedIn. Also have accounts on Facebook and Instagram. My goodness, people can find me anywhere. Just pop me in the search bar, and I'll come up.
Brilliant. And they should also be able to find it, all that information, down in the description of this podcast.
Sure, that'd be great.
Well, Nicole, that's been fascinating. Truly fascinating.
Thank you.
No, thank you. You want to hang about for a second? Wow, what a fantastic story. So if you want to get hold of Nicole and learn a little bit more about what she does, you'll find all those details down in the description. So until the next one, TTFN. Ta-ta for now.
The Tim Heale Podcasts. Ordinary people's extraordinary stories.